This is John Clay, sports columnist for the Lexington Herald-Leader, and I'm here with my fellow sports columnist Mark Story of the Herald-Leader. And Kentucky opens their 2014 football season Saturday against UT Martin, 12 o'clock at Commonwealth Stadium. And Mark and I are here to talk about the season and what we expect from UK football. And Mark, not a lot of rosy predictions about Kentucky as far as wins for this season. Where do you think the Cats, their best chance of getting an upset is on the schedule?
I actually think their best chance for pulling what will be perceived as a shocker is the season's final game at Louisville. You know, as mentioned, it is the last game this year, which is a change, and it sets up perfectly for Kentucky. UK is off the week before the game. Louisville, meanwhile, plays at Notre Dame. And that may not be as tough a game as it looked given what the alleged academic scandal in South Bend, but still that's going to be a huge deal in Jefferson County. You know, it's the first time Louisville has played Notre Dame. You have a big Roman Catholic community in Jefferson County, so I think there'll be a lot of emotion invested in that game for Louisville, and then Kentucky gets to come in the next week. I'm not quite sure the Cats are good enough to pull it off. I really wanted to pick that when I was doing my season predictions. I couldn't quite get there. I think I picked Louisville 28-24, but I think Kentucky has a real good chance.
I'm going to go with Mississippi State, just from the standpoint that I think Kentucky played Mississippi State tough last year in Starkville in a Thursday night game. They get them at home this time. I think Mississippi State, they feel like they're going to be better this year, but I think if Kentucky does, I think Kentucky's got a chance to maybe pull the upset in that game. Now let's flip the coin. What's a game that Kentucky has to be careful? They're not going to be favored in a lot of games, so where do they have to be careful that they don't slip up on this schedule?
I think the dangerous game in terms of Kentucky being upset is Louisiana-Monroe. 2 years ago, Monroe won at Arkansas. Last year, they won at Wake Forest. They're from the Sun Belt Conference. They're given some chance to win that conference. And UK fans will recall the last 2 years they lost to a Sun Belt Conference team, Western Kentucky. So I think that's the game that Kentucky needs to be really careful not to sleep on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the other one is Ohio, the second game of the year. Kentucky's a lot of young. Mark Stoops has a lot of young players. It'll be Patrick Toll's second start, presumably. Ohio has a good, solid program. They did lose their quarterback. They're breaking in a new guy there, but they've been to bowl games the past several years. They have a excellent veteran coach in Frank Solich. Kentucky's got to be careful in that game that they don't slip up. Now, looking at the schedule, what do you think? I think we both agree on this. The pivotal game of the schedule seems to be Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that the Vanderbilt game, which has moved up in the season, it's now the fourth game. Kentucky has two home games that people will expect them to win with Tennessee Martin, Saturday's opener, and then the Ohio game we just discussed. Then they go to Florida and play in the Swamp, and they come home to play Vanderbilt. If they can win that game, you're sitting at 3-1, and people will get a little excited, I think, and you set the season up to have a chance to surprise. If you lose that game, then things get a little grim. I thought the difference between Kentucky and Vandy last year was Jordan Matthews, the Vandy wide receiver, who made so many big plays in that game. I think he caught 11 passes. Well, he's gone. So I think that's James Franklin's gone. So I think that's a game Kentucky can win, and it really needs to win.
No, I agree. I think that's a big game if they could win. The only thing that bothers me about the Vandy game, and you hear Kentucky fans, and I'm sure Vandy fans are the opposite of Kentucky. They look at the schedule and think, oh, we can beat Vanderbilt, or Vanderbilt looks and we can beat Kentucky. I mean, Vanderbilt's handled Kentucky fairly easily the last 3 years. Last year was probably closer than the 22-6 score, but they beat them 38-8 and 40-0 before that. So but Vanderbilt does have a new coach in Derek Mason, a new system. That's going to be an interesting game, and if Kentucky could win that game, it would certainly help them. Now, Mark, what about when you look at that schedule and you're a Kentucky fan, what game you look at and think, oh my goodness, that really scares me having to play that game?
For me, it's LSU in Baton Rouge. Since Kentucky won there in '98 with the famous Hal Mummy end-around call that set up the winning field goal, Kentucky's only played there 3 times. They've been outscored, I believe it's 108-7. I mean, it's just been brutal. They haven't been competitive. LSU is always so athletic, and I think they present some of the problems for Kentucky that Florida has historically presented. Another team that Kentucky has struggled with. That's the game that if I were a UK fan, I would be hoping, not that it doesn't get out of control. That's the game where you could just get whacked if you're not careful. That's the game that would scare me.
Yeah, well, obviously LSU is very scary. I think Georgia's the other one on the schedule. Georgia handled Kentucky very easily last year, even when their quarterback Aaron Murray got hurt in that game. And then Georgia, in reading the preseason experts, some are concerns about Georgia's defense, but on the other hand, you got some people picking Georgia as a possible dark horse to win the SEC and maybe even make it into that Final Four playoff of the college football playoff. And Kentucky didn't finish really strong last year. I know Mark Stoops would like to have a much better showing in that game's towards the end of the year. That'll be a tough game for Kentucky. I think we both agree, though, that we're glad that they're getting to a first game, and we'll have a game to write about after Saturday when Kentucky opens up against UT Martin at Commonwealth Stadium. This is John Clay, the Herald-Leader, along with Mark Story, and be sure and read all Kentucky football coverage on Kentucky.com.